Welcome to the second installment of Redemption Rewatch. In this episode, we'll be talking about Septembers of Shiraz. Septembers of Shiraz is a historical drama that was released in 2015. It was directed by Wayne Blair and is based on the novel of the same name by Dahlia Sofer. While this isn't necessarily a true story, it is based on her own father's false imprisonment in the early 1980s in Iran. Now, Septembers of Shiraz is rated PG-13, which I would say is perfect because there is violence, but it's not gory violence. There is some profanity, but it's minimal. So PG-13 is, I would say, is right. Now, what I didn't enjoy about Septembers of Shiraz my first time around was the lack of specifics. Like, for instance, the time frame is not really clear. It begins in 1979, and then there's a clear time jump, but it's not dramatically so. So we don't know if it's a few months, a year, somewhere in there, but it's unclear. And I think the film kind of takes for granted that you would know all that or that you had read the novel. Yeah, a lot of more specifics are kind of needed to flesh out the story. So basically, something like that isn't really going to change on a rewatch, but did the film redeem itself a little bit? Now, I'm going to give you two summaries. One is as spoiler-free as I can, and the second will be more of like a deep dive where there are spoilers. So I will note where that begins in case you want to jump ahead to the end of the spoilers. Oh, and speaking of spoilers, do not watch the trailers for this film if you haven't seen it yet and don't want to be spoiled, because it breaks all the tension that the film is trying to build up by basically telling you everything that happens. So don't do it. Thankfully, I had already seen the film before the trailer, so it wasn't ruined for me. So the story is set in post-revolutionary Iran. It follows the life of a wealthy Jewish family and how much their lives are thrown into turmoil after the overthrow of the Shah and the shift in power in Iran. So the film basically covers all the changes that take place personally, politically, nationally, socially. So that's about as much as I can tell you without spoiling. So Adrien Brody plays Isaac Amin, who is a jeweler in Iran. So when the regime change happens, Isaac's affluent lifestyle kind of comes under scrutiny, and he is arrested and basically accused of being a spy for the Shah because of a very tenuous connection he has with them. And so his wife starts to suspect that it's kind of bogus. While Itzhak faces his imprisonment and some brutal interrogations and physical torture, his wife Farnez, played by Selma Hayek Pinault, has to kind of try and stay one step ahead of those who seek to destroy her family and their livelihood and their reputation. She has to kind of decide, okay, what stays, what goes, what are they going to burst in here and find? And so basically, they don't have anything to hide, but she's still concerned that certain aspects of his business might draw suspicion. She is also trying to take care of their daughter and, assuage her fears. And their older son is off at boarding school in the US. And she tries to be as vague and calm as possible to him on the phone to not upset him. Eventually, she does have to tell him that Itzhak was arrested and he wants to fly home. And she's like, no, 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 the last place you need to be is here. In fact, we're trying to figure out how to get out of here. So stay where you're safe and just, try not to worry about us. While Itzhak is imprisoned and being interrogated, the man who's interrogating him they kind of start to not bond exactly, but they kind of find things they have in common. And he's wearing a hood, a mask, and he removes it, and they just talk man to man, father to father. And he is played by Alon Abutbul, who I was looking up because I was so impressed with him here. I was looking him up to see what else he's been in that I could watch. And I found out that he very recently passed away, kind of unexplained. He just sort of collapsed on a beach and passed away. So that was kind of sad news to find. As I mentioned, Alona Bootbull gives a wonderful performance here, as does Adrien, of course. I think we've come to expect nothing less from him at this point. Another standout was Shore Agdashlu, who actually was Oscar nominated herself for a previous film, and I believe The House of Sand and Fog is what that was called. So yes, she's wonderful here. She plays the Amin's housekeeper, who has become kind of a family member to them, but they've not really expressed that to her before. So the housekeeper's son, he becomes a little bit radicalized. He gets a little bit of power and kind of goes nuts with it. Becomes very anti anything to do with the Amin family and their lifestyle. And so Shira Agdashlu's character, as I mentioned, is kind of torn. She starts to kind of take some of the things her son says to heart, like, yeah, why aren't we more like family with them? Why haven't we sat for dinner with them? And why do they treat us differently? And so she confronts Farnaz and says, you know what? Is my son necessarily wrong? I mean, why haven't we been closer? And so their relationship starts to change, and Farnaz, her eyes are opened to how she's been treating people. So, in the midst of all this upheaval, socially, politically, legally, all that, there is some positive change that takes place as well, within the family and their circle. So Yitzhak realizes that what was really important was his freedom, obviously, and his family. And so he ends up trading all of his wealth for his freedom. Eventually, the Yamins seek asylum in Turkey. Pardon my pronunciation, I haven't quite mastered the correct way to say it. I believe their eventual goal was to end up in Switzerland. That's per an article I read about the novel. So I don't know if it was clearly stated in the film or not. I maybe wasn't paying close enough attention, but they do cross the border into Turkey at the end of the film. So overall, I would say I did find a few more positives on my second watch. Mostly, I appreciated the performances. Now, I'm not somebody who knows a lot about the events that happened in Iran, and the film kind of takes for granted that you do. And that's a little frustrating because, I mean, I could go read the novel that the film is based on, but you really shouldn't have to do that. A film should stand on its own. But yeah, the film, it kept things a little bit vague. And I think it was an attempt by the filmmakers to not look like they were taking a side, but it was just too vague. It needed more detail. So ultimately, my Letterboxd score is 3 out of 5 stars. I noticed the overall rating there is 2.9, so pretty close. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Redemption Rewatch. I will see you next time. Like, comment, and subscribe. Take care.